Hi everyone. Thanks so much for taking some time to meet with me today. So I'm sure you all saw my email that I sent out. I just wanted to address some concerns surrounding the recent potential expulsion of a student, which we'll refer to as AD. So now before we go into the details, I just wanted to acknowledge some observations I made, but also some observations I've been and feedback I've been getting from the students. So I think we all are aware that the school is lacking some real representation. After breaking down our makeup, I was able to determine that 68% of our school is white, 24% of the school is Latinx, 5% of the school is black, and 3% of the school consists of other races and ethnicities. So the students of color I found are frequenting my office more and more, often because of behavioral problems, being sent down from the classrooms because of issues that are happening there, but also just coming of their own volition. And they're reporting feeling alienated amongst their peers, but also staff as well. They're not feeling very motivated to attend school, let alone complete their school assignments. And over time, even in recess, I've started to observe that this kind of like isolation is persisting. Oftentimes, the kids are becoming a bit more cliquey. And I just really think that there's a greater foundational issue underneath all of this. So I thought we could probably just take a look at the student AD. So it's been reported that there's a pattern of behaviors that are occurring in class that are disruptive. However, none of these behaviors are necessarily putting staff or other students at risk, or even putting AD at risk for harming themselves. And yeah, I'm hearing a lot in the school, them kind of being referenced as like a risk to others, which clearly doesn't necessarily add up, because there's not any specific incident where they've ever put anyone in harm's way. And I think that the language that we're using to talk about these students, not just AD, has a potential to do some really serious harm. So we have to be more strength-based in the way that we're talking about our students. Schools have to be a safe place for them to access their education, to feel uplifted. And as their teachers, we should really be helping them access their natural gifts, not really labeling them. I mean, for a lot of students, the school may be a safe haven as it is. We don't know necessarily what's going on at home. I think the very language that has been used around the student AD is potentially what may have kind of upped the ante or the severity of the consequence, because it appears to me pretty obvious that these behaviors don't really seem to correlate with the severity of an expulsion. And an expulsion has the potential to really damage a student's record. So I just wanted to look into a couple things. So the next part of my discussion, which I think is really the meat, is this idea of the school to prison pipeline and how implicit bias really perpetuates that whole issue. So a lot of what I'm going to reference is from an article. I am going to print out a copy for you. I have another resource for you that I'm going to give you at the end of the meeting. But the article is by Cialaba, 2017. And I wanted to really just first break down implicit bias, since I know some of us probably have heard of it, some of us maybe not so much, which is essentially the beliefs and stereotypes that we all have based on our own personal life experiences. These are subconscious beliefs, so they're beliefs that you're not necessarily aware of, and they typically highlight that we tend to favor our own social groups that we belong to. So for an example, a quick way to kind of check in with yourself and see what's going on in terms of your own implicit bias is to kind of evaluate the composition of your own friend group. How old are they? What is their sex or gender identity? Do you know anything about their religious beliefs? Are they the same race as you? All of this really kind of highlighting that you may be spending more time with people who are just really similar to you. And that happens for everyone, right? Some of us, though, however, may be fortunate enough to have a more diverse or colorful group of people that we spend our time with. Another way that you can test your own implicit bias is by taking the IAT, which is the implicit association test. Though this information, after taking the test might feel a bit uncomfortable for you, it's really important because it helps us kind of reflect on what are some of our own areas of professional development. Once you know about what's going on for you in terms of your bias, then you can acknowledge it and challenge it. But also, how is this impacting our students, right? How is our own implicit bias, our subconscious, favoritism, impacting the way that we're supporting our students in the school? Well, let's look at some statistics. So, Black children embody 18% of enrollment at preschools, and yet 48% of Black students have more than one out-of-school suspension. When we look at their white peers, they reflect 43% of enrollment at preschools, but 26% of white students are faced with out-of-school suspensions. Black students also face school consequences such as expulsion and suspension 3 times more than their white peers. And they make up 27% of referrals to law enforcement and school-related arrests, but only make up about 16% of student enrollment. Students also with disabilities are at 2 times more likely to receive discipline such as school suspension versus their counterparts. And it's important to consider that minorities disproportionately make up most of special education in schools. So, according to a study that was composed in 2014, it was discovered that white teachers consist of the majority of students' education, which clearly creates an issue regarding representation for the students who reflect a more diverse background, as well as creating implications in regard to implicit bias, especially within discipline. So the study also revealed that students of color are dealt much harsher forms of discipline than their white peers, especially by their white teachers. Given that a lot of schools have zero tolerance policies, this means that things like suspensions, expulsions, and stuff are doubling. And with even just one suspension, doubling the chance for dropout for a student, with expulsion putting students at 3 times the risk for involvement with juvenile justice, and with youth who are involved with juvenile justice facing a 70% chance of recidivism before the age of 25, I think it's important to review the statistics I mentioned earlier regarding students of color and consider if we're really setting up these youth for success. So for the student AD, I suggest that rather than the potential of doing more harm than good, that perhaps we make a referral to a community-based agency providing intensive outpatient therapy, or we can call the family, set up a meeting to discuss other therapeutic services that may better suit the family's needs. How do you say? Under every behavior, there's really a function and a reason, all of which tend to be a little bit more complex than a kid coming to school and just having a rough day. We're looking at families who might be struggling with poverty, or families who are struggling to support their children with structure or expectations, or provide certain resources at home. So it may also even just be worth inviting the family in for a PPT meeting to review the possibility of accommodations, or even talk about a 504. Not every student benefits from the same style of education, and each student has their own unique strengths and challenges. In terms of what we could do as a collective, I think there's a couple things. I've been thinking that it might be really helpful to get in touch with a neighboring agency, or perhaps a few different agencies, to support our continuing education. Agencies like the YWCA, for instance, offer training opportunities for different facilities, corporations, things like that, to challenge issues like racism, sexism, and so much more. And it could even be a good opportunity for our students. That we could turn this into an educational event. I also think it would be a great value to us all if we each took the implicit association test and reconvened to discuss the results. There's even various videos regarding other people's experiences and their own, reflections of taking the test and reviewing the results, and they all come from different backgrounds. So it might, maybe it speaks to us. But lastly, according to Blast IU 17, there are numerous alternatives to expulsion and suspension that extend way beyond even community referrals to therapeutic services, some of which are mediation, restitution, alternative programming, and more. Each of which is explored in further detail in a packet that I provided to you. So, I just thought it was really important for us to get together and kind of talk this out. I really don't feel that expulsion is necessary in this case. I think we have some alternate routes, and I really think that we have to kind of look at the system as a whole and think of what we could be doing better. I really think that, though this kind of sounds like a lot, that this is really about working smarter, not harder. The work is already so hard as it is. But thank you so much. Take care.